Thanks for coming on the podcast. I've actually heard about you from a couple of folks who used to work at Broadridge. So good to sort of finally meet and see you.
Thanks for having me, Kachru.
Yes, and if you don't mind, I would love for you to explain what Broadridge does for the listeners, as if you're explaining to a 21-year-old, let's say, to keep things simple, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, the simplest way to think about it is we're a financial technology company that powers a lot of the critical functions in financial services. So we power investing, governance, parts of asset management and operations, communications that are enabled to investors. So we're kind of a really critical part of the infrastructure and the technology that enables financial services. Right, the way we like to say it is we help the financial industry operate, innovate, and grow. Right, and that's powered through our expertise. We've been doing this for a really long time, so we're very trusted in the industry. And then our technology, right? So we're sort of trusted expertise in our transformative technology that sort of powers these functions for the industry.
That's great, Dipti. I'd spent a lot of time, I think, reading one of your articles in Wall Street Journal, right? I think I sort of took a bunch of notes on that, so I'm going to sort of go through some of those notes.
Sure.
They were very, very well thought through. And my sort of number one question is, you sort of mentioned that it's important to get creative and new ways to engage with your audience.
Yeah.
And I think the landscape of marketing itself is going through a sea of change with Gen AI, with a bunch of different consumption habits being changed from the audience perspective. Are there any interesting initiatives or programs that your team is trying out this year to sort of put those changes that are happening in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. One of the things I focus on is the power of storytelling, right? Because what we do isn't entertaining by its very nature, right? It can be very complex. It's hard to find angles to be real hooks. And so we've been trying different ways of doing it, right? One is you've got to sort of understand how people are consuming information. We're all bombarded with lots and lots of information. We're a B2B company. We serve, like I said, the financial industry, but we're essentially talking to technologists and operations people and sort of some of the front office leadership who are being bombarded with all of this information. So for us, it's about, can we find either the right angle or can we humanize the stories, right? Sometimes it's about the packaging of the story, the form, the channel we use. Then it's about the timing and the relevancy. Are we delivering value in the conversation because they really are eager to learn about a new regulatory change that's happening, and can we bring a point of view to there? Or sometimes it's about human interest stories. And I think human interest stories in financial services and technology that can be pretty dry often has been a little bit of a creative spark for us. So for example, we have a Women in Technology program, and it's a great way for us to sort of talk about our expertise and the depth of our capabilities through the lens of the technologists behind right platforms and technology that we sell. So it's about, again, finding these angles. They're a different way to tell the story of who Broadridge is and what our values are than just sort of giving you the standard value proposition or writing the big long thought paper. We do all of that too, but then we try and find sort of unique ways of getting into the.
That's great. And one thing sort of you mentioned in that piece, I remember, was how important is it to ruthlessly prioritize what's happening everywhere? Because as you would know, I think I believe marketing is the one function that gets bombarded with things from everyone, right? Because everybody thinks that they know what marketing's doing. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, but also would love to hear your perspective on what are you cutting down this year? Because it's always important to sort of look at what is not working and what is working and cut down. So
no, it's probably the hardest thing for us to do for all the reasons you mentioned, right? And with in B2B, budgets tend to be pretty small. Right. In our shop, we have great depth and breadth in the capabilities and the products we sell. And so ruthless prioritization comes into many different ways. It comes into what are we going to talk about in the marketplace? Like, where do you put your marketing dollars behind? And often it's about where's the innovation, what's the showroom of Broadridge, not the warehouse of Broadridge. So we've sort of brought this sort of framework in, is what are the products and capabilities that best represent us versus having to market every single product.
Right.
That's sort of one way we've tried to ruthlessly prioritize. And that then connects us back to the business strategy, right? Where's the growth coming from? Where's the differentiation really set up? So that's been one. The second has been ruthless prioritization and how do you activate across channels, right? In like, how do you help marketers make better decisions using data, using insights on what channels are working better for what types of activity. So if it's more awareness, what kind of channels do you want to use? If it's very specifically lead generation, what channels you're using, so that you don't bring your entire playbook to the marketplace, right? It's like, let's activate. And then what happens is, as we've seen, we over lean into low cost and owned channels. So everything gets an email, everything gets a search campaign, everything gets, organic social because it's theoretically free. And how are we cutting back there? Because that just means more assets are being developed, right? We're sort of not coordinating or orchestrating our go-to-market as effectively. So that's where we brought in a fair amount of, ruthless prioritization of what are we going to talk about? What channels are we going to use? Is that powered through both our strategic growth strategy, right? As well as it's powered through our data to tell us what's not working.
One follow-up question on that, Dipti. So I think you mentioned about how important it is to look at data to understand what is working in channels.
Yeah.
In your perspective, because how the world is changing, etc., are you any interesting learnings from these channel analysis? Like, hey, this channel no longer works, or like any sort of high level sort of thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know if I would say we've sort of shut down specific channels. I think we're shifting the role it plays. Right. So, for example, right now we're a July fiscal, so we're July to June. So we're sort of in our first quarter of the year. Our annual plans are being formalized and sort of signed off on. So we're asking simple questions like, does everything get a paid search strategy? Right? Because paid search inherently is a little bit more bottom funnel if you think about the value of it. It can get really expensive very quickly. You've got to think about it in cohesion with your SEO. Right. Are we spending a lot of money in paid search if our SEO is already very strong? Right. And you sort of think about that balance. So, yeah, I think it's less about what are we going to stop doing and what are we going to start doing. I think it's more about what role does it play and does our data tell you that? The other thing we're doing is we're asking a lot of the so what, right? Like we can get really happy and say our CTRs went up 20%, 30%. But it's like, okay, great. So what? Right? Like what is the outcome of a CTR going up? Is it just that your click-through rates have gone up, or is the quality of who's actually clicking through to your site going up? Or so, for example, we looked at really high click-through rates, but then we saw really high bounce rates on our website. So you're paying people to come to your site, but then you're not bringing people to your site. There's a little bit of sort of the looking under the hood. And understanding the customer journey, the experience, the who, the what, the why. That is, I think, helping us make better decisions with our data versus, this is the impressions, this is the click-through rates, and hence, I'm doing better or worse than the benchmark.
Right. One question on that, I think probably a tangential question. I think what you described definitely makes sense. I think it seems like that's something that everybody should do for sure, just to look at what the performance looks like. I'm actually curious to understand your operating rhythm in general, since you manage a global team, right? I'm sure you do one-on-ones with all your direct reports. There is probably a marketing all hands that happens. But any other things that you do as a team to collectively bring everyone together to just improve the operational efficiency of how things perform? It's always
we're working through it, right? So I've been at Broadridge now for about 2.5 years, and every year we try and sort of think about how to make our operational rhythm better. And make our meetings more effective versus just add more meetings, right? My team will tell you we're not there yet. There's still a lot of sort of change as we transform our marketing organization. So here's just a little bit of what we do, and I'll give you some of the newer things we've added. Right? Yes, I have one-on-ones with all my leadership team. I try and do skip levels with some of our top talent, so I have a pulse on sort of what's going on. So that is usually once a month, depending on sort of the opportunity. We have a marketing leadership team meeting, which is all my directs. We meet weekly. So we have that's sort of the operating meeting of marketing, right? That's the running of the agenda and sort of seeing what's going on. Then from a business perspective, we attempt to do quarterly business reviews with our core stakeholders, right? So we can report and we can also problem solve in terms of where do we need to lean in? Where should we start to lean out if we're starting to see that things are changing, or there's there's data that's telling us certain things aren't working? And it's a little bit of a learning agenda for us and for them. right? We're helping them better understand the role of marketing. They're helping us better understand sort of, evolving priorities or questions they might have. And this is beyond what each business marketer already is sort of engaging with the business leaders on. And then as a leader in the organization, I have sort of my own set of, operating committee and strategic meetings that I'm having with the business. The new thing we've started to bring about is quarterly planning meetings with my team. Because planning used to happen where, because of our breadth, it was fairly federated into every segment, right? They were planning their own things, but we weren't sharing as much across segments because sometimes the buyer audience is different, what we're selling is different, the purchase cycle is different. But I think what we've learned is that we need to unify our planning process to bring more transparency so that A, helps us better manage capacity, and B, it actually creates a little bit more sharing amongst the team members of what email is doing. So that is a newer element. And, every quarter we do this, we learn about how the last quarter went and, was it too much bureaucracy? Because that's the other thing I'm very sensitive to, is how do we remove the bureaucracy of how many decks does a marketer have to make?
Exactly.
Right, and how many meetings does a marketer have to attend? Because what you lose is the thinking time, and that's what I honestly worry the most about, which is like you're not getting a chance to take a step back and really think about the outcomes you're trying to drive.
Great point. I actually love that point you mentioned about just the heuristic of how many deck revisions does it take to get the final version, because there is a reasonable number beyond which if it goes, then that it's going through too many people.
That's right.
And this marketing leadership meeting you mentioned, that happens every month or every bi-weekly, every week?
Weekly. So my leadership meeting is every week.
That's great. Awesome. It's a small sort of tangent I want to get from you, because at least the thought process you had was very structured. So I thought you'll also have a structured operating rhythm to get the motion moving. So
yeah, listen, I think we're structured, but part of it is to be agile also, right? I'm trying to sort of encourage our team to say, we have a lot of change and transformation going on at Broadridge and then within marketing.
Right.
And so I would say it is still noisy.
Right.
Because every time we do this, we try to make it a little better, which just means more change. But the intent is that every time we make it better, we actually sort of shave off the inefficiency and we shave off the bureaucracy. And, you'll have to ask my team whether that's working or not, but the intent is there.
But also to your point, one thing I've learned personally, even though we are much, much smaller than where Broadridge is that the quarterly planning helps, because a lot of companies just do annual planning and they just don't revise every quarter based on how the market is moving. So I've just found that to be refreshing and incredibly helpful.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, we were doing annual planning as well, and I think that's where we started to shift because we would lose track, right? And then the books of work would get really inflated and central teams just couldn't manage capacity through it. So that's an attempt to make it better.
The one other interesting experience from your end was the Chase wealth management side, right? I'm a Chase customer, not on the wealth management side. I'm a proud Chase customer. Like, it's a very interesting demographic to market to, and it's obviously much different from the spray and pray kind of channels that a lot of people do in general. So what are some of the learnings that you've had from marketing for Chase wealth management segment, and anything that stood out from you compared to in general what firms do overall from a hey, let's do paid search? Those things don't work, right?
No, I mean, listen, I spent a decade at JPMorgan. My early days were in asset management, and most of it was consumer banking and wealth. If you ask me the one thing I learned, it's the power of data and analytics. Right? For the reason you just said, which is how do you not spray and pray, especially when you are a retail business operating at scale, right? So I sat for a large part of it, I sat within the consumer bank. The other side, I was sort of sitting within the wealth management organization. But in the consumer bank, you were talking to 40 million customers. And what data was doing was helping us understand out of those 40 million customers, about 2.5 million of them were actually wealth management customers.
Right.
Now, most places would sort of say, okay, that's based on just sort of wallet size and demographic, right? But the beauty of it wasn't just wallet size and demographics. We had propensity models that were helping us understand, right? Propensity to buy from a retail wealth advisor versus a wirehouse or an independent, which then helped us understand highest, about 1 million, 2 million customers who were highest propensity based on multiple variables. And this was 7-8 years ago, when no one was talking about AI, but this was machine learning at its best, right? Helping us understand how to understand propensity. That was incredibly powerful, right? Because then my budget was being directed around 1 million people or 2 million people,
Not
not 10 million people
right.
who have a wallet. So that was one. I think the second one, which was, again, for us, it was about a lot of these people were already our customers, right? They were already Chase customers. They either had a credit card with us, or they had a consumer bank account with us, or they had a checking account, or a savings account, or a CD. So you had to understand, what door are you bringing them into, right? If you're not a Chase customer, should I sell you wealth first, or should I sell you a credit card first,
Right.
or right? So there was sort of the
journey mapping
sequencing
right.
of the purchase journey, right? So
Yeah.
you started to think about that digital purchase journey or the in-person purchase journey and how you sort of made it work. The third was because once you were a customer, you were already in our ecosystem. So you were on chase.com, right? Or you were on the Chase app.
Right.
So it opened up new channels of marketing to you, which was very experience-based and very relevant. So we could then activate messaging to you based on your behaviors. You just got your bonus check. Should I remind you that you have a wealth advisor to help you invest in? Right? Again, non-intrusive, a lot of test and learn. But you could, deliver offers at the right time at the right place. It didn't mean we didn't do sort of standard upper funnel work. We did that too because we had to drive awareness around our wealth of capabilities. But we could go pretty granular in the customer journey to think about sort of relevant messaging at the same, same.
No, the first 2 points really did make sense. Like when you said shortlisting the 2 million customers, the immediate obvious thing is, to your point, wallet size, demographic,
That's right.
filter it, right?
Let's go. Yeah.
You don't naturally look at propensity of purchase and stuff. And second point is, to your point, like, it doesn't make sense to, like, I have a credit card, Chase card, like, it's probably a natural progression for me to go into a wealth.
That's right. That's right.
Makes sense. Great. One sort of question I had written down from your notes in that WSJ is that I think you did mention that earlier in the call. You had like a marketing advancement and culture club, right? And we spoke about the operational rhythm. We didn't cover that piece.
Yeah.
We would love to hear your thoughts on what exactly that is. And
yeah, no. And listen, it's probably one of the things I feel really great about sort of my tenure at Broadridge. When I came in, we're about 80, 85 people in the marketing team plus our lead gen team in India. So we're about 100 people if you sort of imagine that. And like I said, we're going through a fair amount of transformation and change. So one of my sort of early areas of focus was to really establish a clear purpose, right? Like as a marketing organization, who are we, where are we going? And part of that was a commitment to drive career mobility and advancement. And so then the question was, I didn't want it to become just an HR run program or a leadership run program. So how do you create something that all of our associates could participate in, and which was associate run, but focused on marketing specifically? And in the work we did and the listening I did, there were sort of two areas that people wanted, right? One, they wanted more concrete advancement opportunities. And this is why I've been in marketing for so long, right? It's a very dynamic space. Like the marketer of today is no longer the marketer of yesterday. The skills need to be developed constantly. So we needed a way to bring in much more skill development within the marketing organization, and then help people unlock more mobility because of that skill development, right? So if you started in a search team, it didn't mean that you could never become a business marketer. Like you could pivot and likewise, right? Business marketers could become more specialized in digital roles or what have you. So mobility was very important. It was something I had benefited from greatly at JPMorgan, and I felt was lacking here because people had been in the same role for a really long time. So advancement was a big part, advancement and skill development. The other side was, in a post-pandemic world, we were still, we were very distributed as an audience, right? And we're all very comfortable now in operating virtually, but what that prevents us from doing is to establishing real human connections. So the culture side came into how do we have a team that really is constantly thinking about engagement and connections and sort of creating and fostering that sort of human touch in a virtual world or a hybrid world. So those two then sort of ended up coming together as MAC. So the leadership team is an executive sponsor of MAC, but MAC is run by volunteers within the marketing organization.
So, when you said the two things you mentioned, right? One is the mobility and the other is the cultural piece. One thing that comes up constantly in a lot of my chats with CMOs is that in marketing, lateral movement is so hard because people can pigeonhole you into like one particular function, and unless you have the support from a mentor or a leader that hey, I'll help you make that change. It's very, very hard to do that. So kudos to you and your team for doing that. It's usually a very, very tough thing to do in a company. So I'm
And
sure.
a small organization, right? Like when I was in JPMorgan, like you were thousands of marketers.
Right.
And so there was mobility across businesses, from the wholesale side to the retail side. Here it's harder. So actually what we're trying to sort of encourage also is mobility outside of marketing.
Right.
Right. So can marketers become, product people? Go into the business or go into sales and sales account management roles, because some of the skill sets are very transferable. It's as long as you sort of deeply understand sort of the value of the business.
Okay. And the other sort of piece that I had was always curious to understand how or what kinds of thought leadership programs are you thinking about this year? Because I truly believe that helps to build a company's brand and come across as an expert in the marketplace. Any programs or I don't know, any series, videos, events, whatever it is that you
Yeah. So it's a little bit of all of the above, right? So for us, one of the areas we established more discipline, right? Because we were creating a lot of content, a lot of thought leadership, but it was almost opportunistic, right? A product person asked for something, the marketer thought there was something relevant.
Right.
So a couple of years ago, we've established much more around alignment of themes. And those themes are something that's built in sort of cohesion with our business and strategy partners. So we're thinking, okay, there's about 6 themes, for example, that are macro themes that we know are really relevant for our clients, right? There's a great democratization of investing. What does that mean? What does it mean for wealth operations and technology leaders who are trying to transform their platforms, right? There's, the cost given sort of acceleration of trading. What does that mean? Massive regulatory change in the industry. What does that mean? So we've got about 5 or 6 such themes that we orient around and are building thought leadership to sort of ladder back to that. The role of AI, right? And how AI is accelerating. So that's one as a starting point, and then we're connecting. The second one is packaging of specific programs. So the 2 I'll mention is, one, we have data-led programs where we go and sort of tap into the industry pulse. So we have a digital transformation study, right, which interviews leaders in technology and in operations and the C-suite across to understand what's the pulse, what do they care about, what are they challenged with, what is it working, how their money is being spent, one way or the other as the world has evolved. That becomes part of a study that has become one of our flagship study that sort of really brings, we call it the gift that keeps on giving, because it's one big study, but you can then extract the wealth view or the asset manager's view or the trader's view. So there's lots of sort of stories and narratives that come off it, but very database, right? It's not opinion, it's data. The other one is the CX study. So if this is sort of the trade, then this is more customers, right? A large part of our business is also enabling our clients to deliver communications, whether they're regulatory communications or others, to their shareholders and investors. So how's consumer behavior changing in, digital adoption, consumption of information, right? Digital experience of these communications. So our CX study is like another sort of flagship program. The third and last one I'll mention is something new that we started about a year ago called the Next platform. So, for Broadridge, our intent is always to help our clients be ready for what's happening next, right, in the industry, given sort of change and disruption. And so we've created the Next program, which is a curation of our content, right? We produce a lot of content, but we're now curating sort of some of the key relevant highlights.
Right.
That is being packaged into, a delivery, which you could either subscribe to or we enable as part of sort of a microsite.
Love that idea. Yeah.
And we're learning through it, right? We're saying the content sort of sticks, more video, less video, long form, short form. So it's a little bit of a early, I would say we're sort of in, pilot phase still of Next, but we think it sort of is a way for us to deliver a more curated experience.
That's a great point. That's one thing that I've seen our struggle, but also a lot of struggles as well. Is that so much content, but how do you collate it to one place where some client can go and like search or like retrieve the content in one place? It's so hard.
Yeah. I mean, there's like distribution strategy and then almost like a library strategy, right? Like it's like the pull and the push off it, and how do you make the push more efficient and tailored and personalized, and how do you make the pull more usable?
Right. Exactly. On that point, are there any early AI use cases you are seeing that your team is using? Would love to hear that actually.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we at Broadridge are still in our, especially in marketing. Like we've actually done a lot of work in Gen AI, and we've got some of the first few use cases in our product side. But on the marketing side, I don't know if I would sort of categorize us as cutting edge by any means. We are doing a few things though, right? We're actively testing a few tools to help from a copywriting perspective. It's all about, for us, it's right now about finding efficiency in the marketing process, right? Copywriting design with Midjourney. I just got an email from our team, our digital team. We're in the process of rebuilding our website, and now we're using, Gen AI to develop meta tags, right? Which again, like you don't need super amount of creativity there. You don't need empathy in telling the story, but you just need raw data that that works. So yeah, we're definitely leaning in. We're actually just about in the process of setting up a Gen AI council to help us think about our go-to-market operations and how we
That's awesome. When you said about the fact that you just need to figure out how to eliminate those bottlenecks and operational efficiencies. Like for example, the fact that we spoke about somebody has to send a deck like 50 times for revision. Like those kind of things that really frustrate people, and they just wish they had a solution. So I'm also excited to hear maybe once the Gen AI council is stood up, your learnings, because I'm sure bunch of people are going to come back with some tools they want to test and like things.
100%.
Right. So how are you going to streamline the whole process? I'm sure it'll evolve, but interesting times.
Yeah, and listen, this is the marketing side. We've got a bunch of tools. We've got a really great team that's sort of really ideating and testing things every single day in a very, very safe way within our own ecosystem and our own data. But like you're using meeting summary tools now for Gen AI. So we don't have to write notes. So you don't have to you can actually focus on listening versus like trying to coordinate the things you're looking to do. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to take a lot of sort of the noise and the pain out of the system if we can get efficient.
One sort of point about video you mentioned, Dipti. I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on video in general as an asset modality going forward, because I think obviously to your point, consumption patterns have changed, but also in finance, what I keep hearing is that it's also going through a transition from like older advisors to younger advisors coming into the workforce, and they are more tuned to consuming video. Is there like an active strategy from your end to do more video content?
I think so. Listen, I mean, if you just sort of look at the broad consumption, across, even outside the workplace, like the workplace starts to reflect how we live, right? And so, we all got hooked on to the 128 characters of Twitter, which now I think is like 240 characters, or with 140 to 280 characters, something like that. We're all consuming content in in reels and storyboards, and so I think that is coming into even to the B2B workforce. Personally, I still feel like there's work to be done from a finessing and scale perspective, right? Like it's still good content still requires a significant amount of work and investment in production quality and packaging and storytelling. So I am eager to sort of see us make more progress there than not, because I think it's a very powerful medium, but it still feels very onerous.
Makes sense. Awesome. One final question from my end. Since a lot of folks listening would be in the middle management marketing teams who also aspire to become CMO someday. Any learnings or reflections from your own career, or any advice you want to give in terms of how should folks in the middle management think about, like, hey, if I want to be a CMO someday, what should I think about in general? Right.
Yeah, I mean, first I would say that every marketer and middle management should want to be a CMO someday, right? So they should you got to dream big and bold, unless you really don't want it. The second, for me, the thing that I have found really works well if you stop thinking like a marketer and you start thinking like a general manager. Right? Start thinking like an owner, because then marketing just becomes a toolkit that you're really good at, but is not the outcome you drive, right? The outcome you drive is the business outcome. And if you're able to sort of switch that, flip that switch in your brain, then you stop worrying about, right, again, like the CTRs and the number of impressions, you start worrying about the outcomes, and you're really connected to the P&L of the product, the business, the organization. And I think that's really the unlock to being, a successful CMO, or someone who sort of is considered to be an effective CMO, which is like you start thinking, I truly believe you develop and nurture more commercial acumen, and think like an owner or GM.
Do you remember when did you like? Was there a particular timeline in which you had seen the transition in yourself that you started thinking more like a GM than a
Yeah.
market leader, or was it deliberate from your end that hey, I need to like start pushing myself towards this, or very very
Yeah.
natural that right? Like,
It's a great question. I don't think I've ever really thought about it in a very obvious way. I think I realized what I loved about marketing was always, 3, 4 things coming together. It was the human aspect of it, right? That's where the creativity and the humanity comes in, because it's consumer behavior and you're thinking about what's going to drive people to behave a certain way.
Right.
There was the business aspect of it, which actually was like, what problem am I trying to solve, right? It wasn't just consumer behavior academically, it was in service of a business problem.
Right.
And then it was this very, very, I think, dynamic space of what tools you use to be able to solve it, right? Then that evolved from direct mail to traditional advertising to digital to, right? So there's been so much change in sort of data and tech, et cetera.
Right.
So, in that, I would say I think it was less about choosing to have stronger commercial acumen, but I think it was a realization that that's what made me more effective.
Right.
At some point in time. And now I'm much more conscious about it. But it wasn't like I woke up one day and someone said, you need to be more of a business person or not. The other thing is, again, and I give JPMorgan the credit for this, is marketing is a growth sport, right? It's about serving growth for the business. You're not marketing to make things pretty or to win awards or what have you. You're doing, and so that was just sort of part of the culture, right? It was about driving business outcomes and the accountability of driving business outcomes, and that just kind of got you to do that even more so.
That's awesome. Dipti, thanks for doing this. I sort of really appreciate the discussion today. I think if there is one thing I took away from this, I don't know if you were over prepared, but you were just so structured in your responses that I just felt like, oh my God, like this is interesting. Like, I've not seen such structured responses from marketing leaders, and the way that you think about in consulting, we learn about MECE and all those different frameworks. I think you sort of listed down like 1, 2, 3, bam, bam, bam. So it was just interesting to hear from you on what is happening.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We try. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of change we're trying to drive, and it's hard to drive change if you don't have a clear line of sight into what success could look like, even if it's going to take you a little while to get there. But thank you. This was a really energizing conversation.
Awesome.